Hi, sweeties. How are you doing? Welcome to my channel. Hope you are great. Disclaimer. This video reflects my personal opinions and commentaries. It's not intended to harass, harm, or defame any individual. Content is for discussions and educational purposes. So I am seeing video of Alex and a lot of people talking about how white people are not ready to fight for change. You and I know that one is true. We don't have to argue it. And she talked about how white people will be going through something my people are going through, but they will rather suffocate in that than coming out to speak up because there is no need for them to speak up. Instead of them to, during the period black people were fighting for some certain kind of things, they will never join. Why? Because they want you to know that all their life is beautiful. Sometimes, for example, I see people saying, I really do wish that I will have the kind of relationship white people have. Shut the hell up. Get into the house with them and see that one person is enduring some bullshit. And that is how it's been. Because one person might be violent, but she has to endure because she is a white woman that wouldn't want anybody to know that, oh yeah, she failed in this or she failed in that. They never sit up. They never stand up to fight for equality, for literally to fight against white supremacy. They don't. Because when they fight against it, where do you want them to stand on to oppress you? Let's get into this video.
I hate when people try to say that patriarchy comes before white supremacy. This is the most ahistorical take in existence. And I think it's because white people cannot fathom a reality where they were not white. Your whiteness has only existed for 500 years. White people were the first people to be colonized under white supremacy. Before you were white, you were Irish, you were Scottish, you were Gaelic, you were Celtic. And all of these groups had a pantheon of gods and goddesses. History shows that in non-Christian societies all throughout Europe, women had various roles in societies. They were leaders, they were warriors, they were priests, they were politicians. Evidence consistently and overwhelmingly show that pre-Christian societies, even in Europe, were egalitarian. When the Holy Roman Empire introduced Christianity to various pagan societies, they subjugated all of the women. That is what introduced paternalism. White supremacy, patriarchy, Christianity, and colonialism go hand in hand. Original disease to all people, white, black, indigenous, will always be white supremacy because white people were the first colonized people. But you fail to realize that because you bit the bait, right? And the bait was conditional acceptance and certain freedoms in order to police the bottom class, which is black and indigenous people. You are so far socialized, programmed, and colonized by mind that you have forgotten that you have not always been white. You cannot even remember a reality in which you were not white. White supremacy is the original disease to all people, and that is a hill that I will gladly die.
So I was talking to my friend about money in politics, and we were talking about how white supremacy is a big factor of why we can't get a lot of universal programs like universal healthcare and free public college inside of the United States, and a big reason for that is due to white supremacy being held up in the United States by our institutions. And yes, I do agree with him saying that white supremacy very much is prevalent within the United States because, I mean, you obviously see it not only with Mexicans and Hispanics joining ICE and seeing their drive to uphold the institution of white supremacy, but you also see it within Black Americans and Asian Americans as well, all people of color, just because, like, for example, one of like a big issue regarding the Black BIPOC American right now is Jasmine Crockett and James Tallarico, and I've seen conflicting things that they both support Israel. I've seen things that they don't support Israel, whatever the case may be. Even if they do support it, they don't. That Jasmine Crockett is not being given the same grace as James Tallarico. And the way my friend described it to me is that James Tallarico is a more digestible white man, which is also the problem that we were having with Kamala Harris when she was running for president in last election cycle. And because these biases are put into place and they're here simply to stop, the bully pulpit moving in the direction of actually helping people get in, helping Americans get better programs to enrich their lives, the white supremacy causes these people to fight against their very own interests. And that is something that we have to reckon with, and that's something that we have to understand, that whether a lot of times that is being done unintentionally, and a lot of people don't realize that. And I feel like because of how much the message of white supremacy is here within the United States, we forget that. And I feel like it's important that we have to stay continuing to educate ourselves, not only on the history of the country, because we have to know where these things come from, but this has been here. It's been very prevalent forever. White supremacy has always been very prevalent within the United States. And I think it's important that we know that white supremacy doesn't necessarily mean that we can't get money out of politics or whatever, but it makes it harder. It makes it harder because with having corporate PAC money on top of having white supremacy there, having those two together creates the problem that we're seeing today. Because now where the billionaires are hoarding massive amount of wealth, the 30 billionaires own like 70% of the wealth in the entire world. That's crazy. And the fact that majority of those billionaires are white men, it shows you that these things are in place for a reason. The system is working the way it's supposed to work. And that's why it's important that if you're going to get involved, you got to get the right politicians into office. And that's why I was telling him when we were having this argument, you can't be voting for corporate Democrats for that reason. And that would be pushing people into office. Because if you get strong leftists who are actually willing to fight, and then you will see the difference. You're already seeing that in New York with Mamdani. And granted, that it's at the local level. And yes, I know that New York's a very a very blue state, excuse me. But you mean to tell me that if you're gonna use the argument, hey, instead of me sending $3 billion over to Israel, and giving them to bomb babies in hospitals, how about I use that $3 billion on our hospitals here inside the United States? How about we invest in ourselves for a change? And I don't know. I think that's just some food for thought that we have to think about. And yeah, guys, we gotta.
You know what's crazy? The fact that white supremacy is so engulfing of white people, and they don't even realize it at half the time, I don't think. White supremacy is so palpable between them that it has white women actively voting against their best interests, against their freedom, against their humanity, in hopes of impressing their husbands, in hopes of impressing their preachers and other male leaders in the community, in hopes of finally being seen as equal to white men. And what's even crazier is they do all of that and it never works in their favor. These white men will never see them as equal. Their womanhood will always keep them as subordinate to white men. And it's just, it's gotta suck to actively vote against the things that give you autonomy because you think that's what you have to do for little Timmy Turner to finally see you as a person. And he never will. Gotta suck.
The biggest example of DEI is white supremacy. You might think I'm tripping because you might say there's no diversity in whiteness, but actually, there's plenty. It doesn't matter where you're from, where you live, what language you speak, what your culture is, what you've done. A hierarchy was created hundreds of years ago. And just because of your white skin, you get to be at the top. No merit involved. Your reality is the one that matters. Your story is the one that should be told. Except you're 20% of the global population. And you know who was placed at the bottom globally? Black people. Somehow, a Russian and a French man can't understand each other, but they can understand racism. They can understand the N-word with the hard R. A man from America and a man from Yugoslavia can have the same hatred for black Americans just based on media that they've seen, but not based on any kind of real experience with a black person, specifically black Americans. Every kind of white person is included in white supremacy. Even if they don't know that one of your parents might not even be white, you might just be white passing, you'll still, because you're white passing, get included in white supremacy until they figure out who you actually are. Even brown people who become the pets, the mascots of white supremacy, get included because they're a token that can be spent just to further the idea of white supremacy. And there's definitely equity in white supremacy because you could be the poorest, ugliest soul on the planet, a product of incest with eyes going a bunch of different directions, teeth that have never known orthodontia, and you could be considered great just because of your skin color. White people go somewhere and all of a sudden they're the founders of something. There's a white girl in Spain right now who was posting videos about how there are such things as panaderias, a floristeria, a fruteria, aka a bakery, a florist, and a farmer's market. But hey, when a white person realizes something exists, it starts existing. Oh, imagine that. And you know, when you're in smaller communities that are still within the world of white supremacy, like the gay community, it's even more palpable because you can visibly see how white men are on the top. The just standard of attraction somehow naturally, despite still being 20% of the global population. And you have Hispanic men underneath because they are closer to white. Then you have Arab men, and then at the bottom, black men, and in between, maybe like other brown people. There is a constant social hierarchy that those of lighter skin get to benefit from. And anytime we as black men talk about our plight in life, hey, everybody suffers. There was a video, a reel on Instagram, where this man is talking about this very experience under this username. And Skippylicious says, that goes for all humans. You can't see the struggle from the outside. The thing is, black people can never talk about their struggles in this world that is filled with people who hate us for no reason, no matter where you go. You could be on the continent of Africa, the blackest continent, the continent of black people, and still find white supremacists in South Africa. And when we talk about our experiences that nobody else experiences, nobody, somehow everybody experiences something. Duh! Everybody experiences something. Duh! Everybody can suffer on this planet, but not the way we suffer. Unless you're black, you're not going to understand. Our form of suffering doesn't trump anybody else's suffering. It doesn't mean other people don't suffer, but when we talk about it, you shouldn't have to feel the need to bring up your suffering as if ours invalidates yours. Thing is, the everyday suffering that other people go through, we still go through on top of racism. Hello? A lot of the suffering that you see Africans go through is because of colonization, a byproduct of racism. So when I told this guy in his comment sections that he should just basically shut up, because anytime we bring up our suffering, y'all gotta be like, all lives matter. When I told him that he clearly doesn't view black people as human beings, he must not interact with black people in real life, his response was, no, you are wrong. Black dick is my favorite kind of dick. But don't think that your experience in the USA is somehow universal. Thank you for proving my point, that the black experience is universal. We are just objects, gimmicks, a monolith and a dick. A way for you to get pleasure, but not a human being. And I told him I was going to embarrass him on my TikTok, and here we are. This is why sometimes I despise seeing the rainbow representing the gay community, because it's just not accurate. Nobody wants to address this shit. The rainbow to me is happiness. It represents like happiness. And I can't be fully happy until white supremacy is dead and gone. I hate seeing people who benefit from basically DEI, white supremacy, walking around like royalty, walking around like they're princes that have earned some kind of royal position, and you never have. Half the time, y'all can't even appreciate your white skin because you're constantly tanning it. Why do you want to be our complexion all of a sudden? And the other struggle inside of the gay community is you want to find someone who is attractive. And if you want a person of color who is attractive, you have to compete with white people every time. Like, white people have been able to just exist. It's honestly easier to be with a white person because they've been able to just exist. They don't have to fight racism. They don't have to fight a lack of privilege. They don't have to decolonize a self-hatred that they have been taught. They don't have to catch themselves in moments where they realize, oh my God, I'm spreading my hatred of myself. We as black people have to contend with that. Not only were we put at the bottom of the hierarchy, but we were basically caged. Besides slavery, after slavery, we couldn't even have successful towns without them being bombed and drowned. And then they made neighborhoods called the projects. They had people being in the ghetto, in the hood, and then fed all these drugs, and you have over-policing, consistent dehumanization where black people were just given a hard life, which makes you hard as a person because you have to be to survive in this kind of environment. And then you have people like me who were raised in the suburbs, and I find it hard to want to be around someone who is hard all the time. So it makes it seem like I'm anti-black. And I think every black person needs and deserves tenderness and therapy and relief, global relief from the hell, the mental illness that is white supremacy. We have been abused globally. Soccer players can't even play their sports without being harassed just for existing. Not just existing, but excelling at what they do. And the crazy thing is, the average white person, especially white women, will have more mercy and tenderness and humanity towards abused animals than they do the black population. We have been abused. And there's no tenderness. There's no tenderness, there's no care, there's no offer to help, to house, to relieve. There's thoughts and prayers, Jesus. Really, there's just derision, hatred, vitriol, dehumanization. Y'all just naturally think that we're animals, but the actual animals that have been abused, you acknowledge their abuse and then help them recover. You can't do that with black people, and it's scary. Also, there's this video of a man who is working with getting rid of DEI within the government, who is testifying in a lawsuit, who cannot define what DEI is, but yet he's working to get rid of it. They were supposed to be a documentary about how Jewish women were affected in Nazi Germany, and the funding was cut for that because of DEI. They didn't want it. According to that man, this specific story was discriminatory. I bet you if it was about white men and what they went through in the concentration camps, or the white male soldiers, he wouldn't have had an issue, because the stories, the narratives, the lives, the realities of white men is all that matters to these people, regardless of the type of white man. I'll put the video at the end, but long story short, white supremacy just cannot last. I will never be happy until it's gone.
How do you interpret DEI? There was the EO explicitly laid out. The details, I don't remember it off the top of my head.
That's okay. I'm asking for your understanding of it.
Yeah, my understanding was exactly what was written in the EO.
Okay. So can you...
I don't remember what was in the EO.
So right now, do you have an understanding of what DEI is?
Yeah.
Okay. So what's your understanding as you sit here today in this deposition?
Well, it was exactly what was written in the EO. And so anytime that we would look at a grant through the lens of complying with an executive order, we would just refer back to the EO and assess if this grant had relation to it.
Waiting until you're sure protects white supremacy. Now, most of us know that to be racist, you don't have to be wearing a white hood or be in the middle of the street screaming slurs at people. That racism can be structural and it can be really insidious. What white supremacy and fascism thrive on is people's hesitation, people's fear of getting it wrong. When you choose safety over action, you reinforce white supremacy. I'm sorry. I know it's uncomfortable to hear. When you tell yourself that the only time you'll act is when you can be 100% sure, when is that going to happen? You're going to hold yourself to an impossible standard. And this is something that white women in particular tend to do. They have these perfectionist tendencies, taking that anxiety that you feel inwards, turning it on yourself. And then all you end up doing is reinforcing white supremacy and patriarchy. No one wants that. The real work is in accountability. It's holding yourself accountable. It's holding your friends and family accountable to commitments that they make when it comes to anti-racism.
This is all I got from this video. And while Alex was talking, there is something that I picked up from her video, and I am going to start with that. And that is, white women will be going through what every other person, maybe black people, are going through, but they will rather suffocate in that than standing up to fight with black people. So what does that mean? White people or white Americans, they never fight for change. They never fight for change. And that is more like what we are experiencing to this very moment. Because you and I can actually see how bad it is already and how things are going deteriorating, right? But majority of them still voted for James Talarico. You and I are seeing what is going on today, but they are still all out there supporting this administration and what is going on, what they are doing, like they are supporting Israel. You know, sometimes I feel like some of them are blind, but then you find out that they know what they are doing. Some of them are male-centered. They want to do anything to please their husbands. Some of them are just lost. Because tell me how, as I am, and I am seeing things go bad or go wrong, and I am not fighting against it. I don't know if you understand what I am saying. That tells you a whole lot. But I would just leave it at that. I made a video not long ago, just a few hours ago, and I was talking about how if racism or white supremacy is something that white people are willing and ready to fight for, that I am very sure that by today, we will not be experiencing racism. Black people will not be experiencing racism again. White supremacy will just be a thing of the past. But because they benefit, like there is something they are benefiting from it. You know, each time they wake up and they see themselves that there is someone that they are better off. When I say better off, not because they have more or something, but because they feel like they have privilege than you. So they feel so much covered. You can fight your way out. The fact that they wake up some days and they feel like, man, I can oppress this person. That alone is what gives, like, you know, a lot of joy. Because I made an example about how some of them will tell you that you should be grateful that you are in the United States of America, that if you were in your country or something where it got you from, that you probably might be worshiping stone, or, you know, that mentality that they have. And they tell you that you are in the land of the living. You should be grateful for what you have and make use of it. Or when something goes bad with them and they are being treated the way they treat people, and they tell you, why are you treating me like a minority? And then they tell you that black people are not experiencing anything. But then they turn around to ask, why are you treating me like a minority? That tells you a lot. Black people do not trust them. It is not because they don't want to be in community with them, but if it is because you guys are not trustworthy, there is nothing as beautiful as having someone you can do business with and you can trust the person. That tells you, like, you know, there are some people you have in your circle If you ask me, who are you? Like if something is happening today and there is someone you need to pull up that you need to call on, I will tell you, please call my sister first. It shows trust. Black people cannot say that. But you guys will call them. You guys will call black people in your dying moment because you know they will rescue. But black people cannot call you to rescue them. That is how bad it is. And when black people complain, you guys think maybe they are learning, that kind of story. No, they know what they are saying. Because true, this is what you guys give them. This is what your behavior towards them. I will draw the curtain here. Bye for now.